Good morning, chemistry students. I wanted to take a minute to go over your lab handout and just briefly talk about the sections that need to be included. Of course, at the top of your sheet, you should have your name, your lab partner's name. Make sure you clearly indicate that that is your lab partner, the date of the experiment, and the date of the lab write-up. And there are 6 sections that are going to be graded. You'll get 2 points for the title section. This also includes names and dates. That should be a gimme section. Please don't miss the points on that, because all you have to do is write down the same title listed on your lab handout and make sure that you have this section at the top here. There's going to be 4 points for the purpose, 4 points for procedure, 6 for data and observations, and 7 each for questions and conclusions. So you notice this is heavily weighted toward these 3 sections down here. The purpose of your lab. This is a brief statement about what the experiment's designed to determine or demonstrate about chemistry. This should reflect the purposes on your lab handouts. This should reflect all of the purposes listed on your lab handouts. This is the section where you will also list your hypothesis, that is your educated guess concerning what purposes you have. So for example, in the first lab that we did this semester, we had our hypothesis about which of the materials that we measured would have the greatest density. Okay, so that listing and that educated guess about densities should be included in your purpose underneath the portion of your purpose that refers to a measuring of density of different materials. So include your hypotheses up here in the purpose section. The procedure is a brief summary of what you did. Okay, don't simply copy out the procedure from the handout. I don't need to have you retype that. I already have those steps. Okay, what I do need is you to briefly go over what you did during the experiment in your own words, enough so that somebody could follow, your data and observations by referring back to your procedure. And this needs to have an explanation that is detailed enough that somebody would understand how to replicate your experiment. Data and observations. This is any data tables that are filled out on the handout, and you may or may not have a data table for any particular lab. This is also things like, what did you observe? What did you see? What did you smell? What did you hear? Any measurements that you took need to be included in this section. This needs to be laid out in such a way as to be easily understood. Don't just give me a sheet of your scratch paper that has a bunch of numbers written all over it. Everything needs to be clearly labeled, and you need to have the right units. You also need to have the correct number of significant figures based upon whatever measuring device that you used. Okay. Questions. Answer any questions listed in your lab handout. The questions section also includes any calculations you had to make. So again, for example, our first lab covers density. So the calculations for your densities of the different materials, the points for doing those calculations is going to be included in this section right here. Now, the one thing to note is the calculations that you're going to be doing need to be based on your data. I'm not asking you for information out of your book concerning densities, for example. I'm asking you to calculate based on your experiment the densities or whatever is required in that particular experiment. So this section ought to refer back to your data and observations if it needs to. The conclusion section. What did you learn from the experiment? Your conclusion section should be based on your observations, and it should also look back to and refer to each of your purposes, and it needs to refer back to your hypothesis. This section will be graded on whether or not you draw conclusions based on your data. Okay? You need to talk about what you measured and what you recorded. And again, I'm not looking for, answers from the book. I'm looking for you to explain what happened in this experiment, right? If what you measured during the experiment does not line up with what you know to be true from our book study, then you need to seek to explain that. Maybe this is also a section where you can talk about places where possible error might have crept in, This is an opportunity to sum up all of your experiment. And as a summary of your experiment, it should probably be, not probably, it should be able to stand alone. I should be able to look at your title and your purpose and then skip down to your conclusion and understand the basics of what your lab was about. Just a reminder, these lab notes are an evidence of your work, your understanding of concepts that we are seeking to demonstrate in these experiments. This needs to be written neatly. You need to express your thoughts clearly. Use complete sentences. Use correct grammar and spelling. This needs to be as professional as possible because this is something that you can hand to someone to show that you have worked on developing these concepts on your own. And again, this should be something that could be duplicated. Okay, of course, that goes back to your procedure, but really is a reflection of the entire lab write-up. As I stated, going through these sections, each lab is going to be worth a total of 30 points, and any section that is completely missing, you will miss all the points for that section. So, hope that gives you an idea of how to start. Lab write-ups can be written out neatly. Again, emphasis on neatly, or you can type those up. And if you have any questions, as always, contact me with those questions.